In this video, we're going to talk about how to scale your no-code app and business by doing the unscalable. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but here's the reality. You want to scale your no-code app quickly, but you want to be in control of it and you want to be the one building it. And you probably don't want to be spending thousands and thousands of dollars on ad campaigns that are risky at this early of a stage for you. So looking at those constraints and those goals that you have, how do you still build quick traction with your app and your app-based business? Well, it starts by doing the unscalable, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because you need to hear every piece of this because I want you to be moving forward confidently with your app and your business. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and with no technical background required. So how do you scale your app? By doing the unscalable. Well, what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard. Now, I want to start by drawing out a spectrum here. And we're going to look at those goals that you have and the constraints that we mentioned that you're working with in order to achieve those goals. So you want ultimately to scale fast, right? That's what all of us want. You want to grow your app quickly so that you can build it into a business, step away from potentially whatever it is you're doing now and have something that's more flexible and that you can control and that supports you, right? You want to scale fast. It's pretty simple, but you want to build yourself, right? You want to be the one in the driver's seat right now because you want full control over the app. That doesn't mean that you have to always be the one maintaining and managing the development, but at least right now, you want to be the one building yourself, and you don't want to spend a ton of money right now on marketing, right? You're not at the point where you should be running these ad campaigns that are costing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that honestly, a lot of the time just funnel into research and development costs because that's a lot of what running ads involves. So how do you reach this goal? How do you get to the right side of this spectrum here? But considering those constraints that we have on the left side. Well, what we have to do is find a meeting point in the middle, okay? That was supposed to be a point, but we'll go for this rounded angle. That works too. So we want to find this point right in the middle where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. And that involves doing the unscalable, okay? It involves doing the unscalable at least right now. Now, we're going to dive into what exactly this means, because this is a thing that's going to allow you to build quicker traction with your app, considering the constraints or the boundaries you're working within right now. So let's flip over to another sheet here so that we can have a lot of room. And what I want to do is break down exactly what doing the unscalable means. So we're going to have these three sections here. And doing the unscalable involves three different things when you're just starting out. So the very first thing that you really need to be focusing your time and effort on right now, this is very unsexy, but you need to be practicing the fundamentals, okay? You need to put time into the fundamentals. And what I'm talking about here are the technical and strategic fundamentals that are involved with building and launching an app, okay? So for example, the clients who we work with, they don't learn a concept or a skill or a technique, implement it, and then never think about that again. No, they continue working on the fundamentals because the goal is not just to launch an app. The goal is to launch an app and then grow and scale and manage that app moving forward for as long as you want. And it potentially might mean building and launching another app, and then growing and scaling that app long-term as well. You can't do that unless you consistently practice the fundamentals. So if you are using Bubble, for example, as your no-code app development platform, you need to understand the fundamentals, and you have to keep practicing those. It's like any skill that you're looking to build, right? If you want to build your fitness, you're not going to go and do one workout and think that that one workout is going to serve you for the next 6 months to a year. No, you need to go and do a workout every single day. This applies to your app development skills from a tool standpoint. It also applies to your strategic app development skills. What's the process you're using to actually develop and test and launch your application, right? These are fundamentals too, and you have to understand them, because if you don't, what usually happens is you can never scale on top of your app, okay? If you do not practice the fundamentals early on and then consistently ongoing, you're going to have a hard time scaling on top of whatever the core foundation is that you build for your app, okay? You want to be able to build an app and launch early, right? And then continue growing. That's the part that a lot of people forget, is the continue growing part. All right, if you don't practice these fundamentals and you don't understand how to apply them in your development, then anytime you try to take a step up and do something a little bit more complex, add on a more advanced feature, you're never going to be able to scale, because you don't know any of the underlying fundamentals that will support that scale. Okay, so you have to consistently do these fundamentals. I just can't stress it enough. Okay, now, number 2, you need to make sure you test in phases. Okay, now keep in mind, we are talking about the unscalable here. All right, what I mean by that is these things take time, right? When you're scaling, ideally, you want to automate or make more efficient the things that you are doing, because as you scale and you take on more capacity, then you yourself have to make sure that, you know, even though you can't clone yourself, you can still support that scale, right? So early on, that means doing things that maybe aren't automated, doing things that do take a little bit more time, because they're going to set you up for earlier success and long-term success. It's a time investment up front. It's unscalable up front. It creates scale later on. Okay, so testing in phases. This is the next thing that I want to talk about, right? The way we guide our clients through their apps development, their testing, their launches, is by doing this in phases, right? Generally, when someone steps into the app space, in their minds, they're thinking of launching a full scope application to lots of users. The app is perfect, it's pristine, it's beautiful, and as soon as they're on the market, things just skyrocket for them. Okay, that's the dream. The reality doesn't usually look like that. All right. In order to achieve something like that, you need many resources. Okay. Large companies can have big, grand scale launches like that. When you're working in certain constraints, you don't necessarily have those resources. And so planning for a launch like that is usually not realistic. Instead, you can build, test, and launch in phases. Now, this is unscalable in the beginning because it takes a little bit more time to test these different components, to launch. And, you know, I say that it takes more time. In reality, it usually takes a little bit less time. I'm going to add in that caveat there as I continue through this, but it does feel like a more time-consuming process, right? most people just want to build, launch, and go, right? Testing in phases can feel more time consuming. It can feel less scalable because you're not having that big grand slam launch right at the beginning. So it feels like you're going through these stages and you're not really, building up a bunch of traction with your app. But the reality is, if you test and launch in phases, meaning you follow a soft launch methodology, you bring on your initial alpha testers so that you can shore up a contained focus area with your app. You move on to beta testers. So again, you can shore up a very contained focus area with your app. Then you move into rolling out from there. The process sounds longer, right? It sounds unscalable. But what it really means is that you are launching earlier than you otherwise would, which lets you build up consistent traction with your app. It might not feel like a big leap and bound forward, but it is a process that's made up of consistent smaller steps. And usually it's easier to take more consistently small steps than it is to take one massive step. Okay, so it can feel like it's unscalable, but if you don't do this, what ends up happening, and we see this so many times, is there is too much rebuilding. There is way too much rebuilding. Because when you try to take these big leaps and bounds forward, when you finally launch everything that you've built, and by this point, it's usually a lot more than you should be building, then, you've made a ton of guesses and there's a ton of rebuilding involved in that. Okay, so while testing, launching in smaller phases can feel unscalable, long-term, it is far more scalable for both your app and your time if you do it this way. Okay, now the third thing I want to talk about is not technical. We're going to talk about manual outreach. So we're talking about user outreach here. When most people are launching their apps in their businesses, one of the first things that they want to automate is their outreach. Okay, they put all this focus into the development of their apps and almost none into the outreach. They sort of just expect that if the product is perfect, the users are going to come no matter what type of marketing they do. And that is not the reality, okay? And so again, if you're not looking to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on research and development when it comes to ads and marketing, the best way to enable long-term scalability with your app and with your outreach is to start with manual outreach. So, when we're working with clients, we talk about bringing their default users as the first people who come onto their app. Default users being the lowest hanging fruit that they have access to. And depending on what type of app you're building, there are different types of default users who you can reach out to. But this involves manual outreach. It potentially might involve manual emails and honing in an outreach process that actually sees conversions. Right? It's not a matter of just throwing a bunch of stuff out there and seeing what sticks. It really involves taking a strategic approach, going after your default users, bringing them on, seeing what works in converting them, tracking that, finding the trends, and then replicating it afterwards so that you can pinpoint your marketing and your outreach moving forward versus continuing that manual approach. Okay. Now, again, sounds like there are a lot of steps, and that's why this is one of the unscalable things that you can do in the beginning to really achieve longer term success with your app. If you don't do this manual outreach in the beginning, what we often see is wasted investment. Okay, wasted investment. It's a couple of scary words. Nobody wants that, right? But that's the reality. If you want to launch potentially later on a really well-crafted advertising campaign. If you want to step in front of the big players in your market, in your industry later on, and deliver a value-packed pitch to them later on, and you need to start by doing some of the unscalable stuff, some of the manual outreach, so that you can actually find what works before you optimize it, before you automate it. Okay, this is really important. And each of these things, right? Getting the fundamentals down, testing and launching in phases, manual outreach. This really, it makes up what's involved in your very first launch. These things aren't scalable. You shouldn't need to do these things forever. But if you do them right at the start, then the things you do later on that are more optimized and automated are going to be much more impactful, and they are going to allow you to scale to a much greater level. Okay, so practice these things with your app's development, with the testing, with your launch, with your user outreach. And the really cool thing is, once you have these fundamentals down, for example, you aren't really limited to what you can achieve with your application, right? You can build whatever you want. You can build on top of that whatever you want. You can build another app if you want. You can take the fundamental development and strategic skills that you have and apply them to different use cases, different scenarios, and that is repeatable. Okay, you have to build those fundamentals before you can make them repeatable. So you have to do the unscalable before you can scale. But once you do, I mean, the options you have are pretty much limitless. And that's a really, really big advantage for you as an entrepreneur. Okay, now when you test in phases, right? This is something that it's so integral to a solid development plan. I've seen people time and time again trying to launch way too much all at once because they think that's what's going to help them scale. And usually what happens is, like I said here, too much rebuilding their entire app, right? Burnout, okay? A ton of stress. You're doing something brand new and trying to, step into a new space, learn new skills, build a new product, and launch it at a point where you think it's just, it's perfect and completely ready. It's a lot, and it can lead to a lot of burnout. Okay, and it can just lead to way too much guessing, and none of that is going to help you scale in the long term. All right. Testing in phases, it can feel unscalable. Launching in phases, right? It can feel unscalable in the beginning because it feels like a longer process. But in reality, you're just setting yourself up for much more streamlined and smooth scalability later on. Okay. And then with our manual outreach, right? This is something where once you have this down, once you have honed in on the right outreach, the outreach that works, okay, because you are not going to build your product and automatically just have tons of people asking to use it without you doing anything related to outreach, okay? Doing this manual outreach in the beginning, making sure that you're actually finding trends, tracking your outreach, testing different things, and then optimizing on what works. That is what is going to be scalable long-term. Otherwise, you're just going to be guessing. Once you actually start spending money on marketing outreach, you're just going to be guessing. And a lot of that money is going to be wasted. And we don't want that. Okay. So you have all of these foundational pieces. You're building the app from the start. You're doing these unscalable things in order to scale long-term. And later on, you can automate a lot of these things, right? You can better hire, right? That's a form of automation in a way. You're not doing the work. Someone else is doing it. If you have these things down and you know what works and you're building from the start, right? You're the one who's in the driver's seat from the start. That's an excellent way that you can create a lot more scalability. You can start to delegate things, and that's going to be really important for your growth. So do the unscalable, right? Do the unscalable at the start, and it's going to help you grow your app long-term a lot more effectively. So I hope this is helpful for you. Now, this is the kind of thing that we work with our clients or that we work on with our clients every single day. They're going from their idea stage to having their scalable first version app. They're doing some of these unscalable things right now because they want to scale long term. They want to be in control of their businesses. They want to do it in the right way from the start, in the right way that's right for them. Okay. And if it feels like this is the right way for you too, then you can reach out, schedule a call with our team, and we can put some strategy in place for you and for your app. Head to coachingnocodeapps.com/apply, and you can grab a time there. We'll talk further. All right. Thanks so much for watching again. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.